Hello again. I had a lot of fun rambling about random crap when I drew Toy House users OCs the last time, so I think I'd like to do it again. This time though, I've decided to do all the fitting the text onto the screen stuff after I generate the text to speech, because I noticed that doing it beforehand makes the voice pause at weird moments. Just like last time, I must mention that I'm using text to speech because I'm not confident enough to record my own voice. Speaking of, it's been a while since I used CapCut, so when I went to choose the voice, I noticed that they added fucking Bibble from Barbie Fairytopia and Lois Griffin. I just checked again and I noticed they added several other copyrighted properties to their voice library, including Markiplier of all people. I swear to God, this cannot be legal. And of course they use AI-generated images, which is just it. I shouldn't have to explain to you how AI is harmful and shouldn't ever be used, though I'll just give a quick summary of the big reasons. First off, AI companies train their software off of the works of other people, whether it be art, music, or writing without their permission. Secondly, it can cause artists to not be able to find jobs because their would-be employers had decided to let a computer do the work instead. And thirdly, AI takes up a lot of energy and is very harmful to the environment. Even doing so much as talking to an AI chatbot uses enough energy to run an entire country. In all honesty, I knew CapCut had a lot of AI features, but this is kinda concerning considering they're using copyrighted properties like Betty Boop, Boyack Horseman, and Mickey Mouse. Sure, they changed the names of some of the characters, but you can still obviously tell they're the same, and I feel like that's gonna get ByteDance in some legal trouble. But then again, I don't really know what the copyright rules are for AI. Oh, I'm not really sure. I dunno. Just something weird I noticed. Anyway, I guess it's about time I tell you who you're looking at right now. You've probably already seen her if you follow me on Tumblr or Toy House. But this is Yuriko Togami, Yuri for short. She is my Danganronpa OC and I love her very much. She is a Cheleskami Celestax Byakuya Thankid and is the ultimate chess master. She's usually very quiet, deadpan, and snarky, though once you get to know her, she's surprisingly very chaotic. She's introverted, smokes weed, and speaks in a very monotone voice, which makes it very hard for people to tell what her intentions are. She likes to take advantage of this by making up the most batshit insane things about herself to get a reaction. She doesn't really emote much, though she occasionally experiences mood swings which make her extremely expressive. She also loves dogs and has a pet borzoi named Gambit. Yuriko comes from an AU where Celeste survived the killing game in Trigger Happy Havoc, of course, and her backstory is basically that growing up, the other kids would only befriend her just so they could have bragging rights, since her parents are super rich and famous, which caused her to develop depression later in life. The only real friends Yuri has are Shuchi, who is Makoto and Kyoko's son in this AU, Kokichi, and of course Gambit. How very sad. This almost hour-long video is all about Yuriko because she's my favorite OC, and I had a lot of art ideas for her that I wanted to get out of my system. Not only is she a Thankid for a rare ship that I just adore, but I feel like she's probably the most unique character I've made. I've made characters who have similar traits to Yuriko, of course, though I've never made a character with a mix of all of Yuri's traits before, so I'm very proud of this girl. Anyway, I don't know how to smoothly transition to this next topic, so let's just jump into it. So you guys know GROGAR, right? The classic villain in My Little Pony that everyone remembers and loves? Well, found out a couple weeks ago that GROGAR wasn't just a character in G4, but actually first appeared in a story arc all the way back in the G1 cartoon. I first found out about it after seeing a screenshot of G1 GROGAR in a YouTube video and a T first. Thought it might have been a fan edit someone made since he barely changed between generations until I checked the wiki and I saw it was real, and it just blew my mind. At the same time though, I find it weirdly creepy for some reason. Like, id. The way his design barely changes kinda makes me feel like he's some kind of CCP or Creepista monster. Like Zalgo or Lord X. That could just be me and my horror poisoned brain though. So I've had this idea for a digital horror series for a bit now. I don't know if I'm actually gonna make it since what I have in mind for it are too ambitious for my current skill level. Oh, I'm not gonna disclose too much about it on the off chance. Actually will make it since I don't want anyone to steal my idea, but the basic gist of it is that the story is told through reuploads of old YouTube videos from 2019 documenting a young woman's life before her death. The story has a sort of psychological horror aspect to it, with it touching on issues from that era or at least, what people thought was an issue back then, which, to clarify, I'm not talking about COVID. The story takes place before the pandemic. I've been calling the series the Bessie Bones Archive in my head. Like I said, I don't know if I'm actually gonna make this into an actual series. It'd be cool if I did. But don't get your hopes up. As of right now, the story is just an idea and I'm fine with that. Besides, making an entire 7-episode long YouTube series feels like too much work anyway. I know some of you are probably thinking that I was kinda talking about the year 2019 like it was 20 years ago, but I'll have you know that I was still a middle schooler in 2019 and I'm literally old enough to vote now, so it honestly feels like 20 years ago to me. Anyway, me being the nervous wreck I am, I've been sorta imagining what my life would be like if I actually did make the series, and I've low-key been freaking myself out, because the thought of it potentially reaching ranks of series such as LIIITTTTLLLE Games or Cheskid's Archive is kinda intimidating to me. There's a lot of things I've done that people would rip me to shreds for if I were more popular, and I can't stand the thought of that. I know, it'll probably never happen, but in all honesty I don't leave the house often and I spend all day on the internet, so it leaves me with a lot of time to get stuck in my own head about shit that doesn't matter. Man, I don't know what to talk about. I actually wrote down a list of things I could talk about beforehand, but there isn't that many to choose from. So you guys like fanfiction? I like fanfiction. I've been into fanfiction since I was around 10 or 11 years old. If I'm being honest, it originally started out with an interest in the more citrus Y side of things since I was a preteen girl and I would often watch YouTube videos of dudes laughing at SpongeBob smut or whatever. I wasn't really getting those sorts of feelings yet. I just read them because I was morbidly curious and I thought it was funny. Anyway, I'm saying this, I've seen a lot of weird stories on sites like fanfiction.net and Wattpad back in the day, and maybe that'd be entertaining for you? In the last Speed Paint I mentioned seeing a Deltarune fanfiction where Kris and Ralsei got sawed in Shrek's swamp, and there's plenty more messed up stuff to talk about. See, one of the fandoms I would read fanfictions for a lot was Professor Layton. I've never played any of the games. I just liked looking at fandom stuff for it, because my sister liked it, and I remember coming across a smut fanfic between the characters Flora and Layton. Now, like I said, I've never played a Professor Layton game, but from what I've gathered, Flora is 9 years old, so that's fucking weird. As far as I know, the author didn't actually ship these two as it said in the title of the fic, that it was a crack ship. They also aged Flora, but not by a lot. From what I remember they made her 16, though neither of these are excuses. It's still fucking weird that anyone thought it was a good idea to write that. There's also that time I read a Minecraft fic where Steve fucks a villager. Everyone in that story was of age. Thank God, though that story was also how I learned what areolas were, and I kinda think about that sometimes. Moving back to Professor Layton, but not questionable Rule 34, there was also that one fanfiction I read that was basically a crack fic where alien bees invade Great Britain because they're sick of the humans putting honey in their tea, and honestly, that's still funny to me even to this day. It's a shame the author didn't continue it after one chapter. Another one I read but barely remember was essentially one where the cast goes on wacky slice of life adventures. I don't really remember anything about it other than they made Layton stan One Direction. I don't really know when the story was written to give a timeline of events. I was 10 years old in 2016 and turned 11 in December of that year, though looking back, I feel as though it was made sometime in the early 2010s and they only made him a directioner because of how common it was to make fun of that band and call them gay or whatever. Do you guys remember the YouTuber Regretful Reads? I used to be a big fan of his fanfic narrations before his channel got taken down. Apparently, from what I've heard, his channel got taken down because someone accused him of being a pedo, because of the fact he narrated a lot of smut fan fictions for children's media like SpongeBob or Kung Fu Panda, and his channel got mass reported, which, if true, really sucks, especially considering he put a warning at the beginning of all his videos stating that they weren't for kids. Anyway, I'm bringing this up because I remember writing a fanfiction on Wattpad with the hopes of him reading it on his channel back when I was around 14 or 15. I didn't send it to him or anything. I don't remember if that was even a thing you could do, but the story was a worm on a string X-Reader fanfiction revolving around the red string of fate trope. The story's actually still on my Wattpad if you wanna read it. Basically, the plot of the story was that Y or N had a crush on a giant worm on a string named Jeffrey Wormington, who was the most popular boy in school. One day, they woke up with a red string tied around their wrist, and they found out Jeffrey is their soulmate. Shenanigans ensue. I remember I tried to water down the pop culture or fandom references a lot for that fic so that his fans wouldn't get confused. Like, for example, Jeffrey's voice claim is Monokuma from Danganronpa, though in the actual story, his voice is described as incredibly high-pitched and screamy. If it wasn't meant to essentially be YouTuber bait, I would have just mentioned the character by name since the story is a crack fic. Funnily enough, I hadn't played Danganronpa yet at the time since the game hadn't been ported to the Switch yet, though I would sometimes reference it in my stories or whatever, because I knew I wanted to join the fandom solely because the memes really pulled me in lol. If you couldn't tell by the types of things I've been sprinkling into my works, such as my drama is more popular than content, animatic, or the themes of mental health in my Wattpad stories, I have anxiety. I've had it pretty much my whole life, and one of the ways it materializes with me is that I get very defensive about things I like if I see someone say something bad about it. This is relevant because one of the things I get defensive about is the Kris x ralsei ship in the Deltarune fandom. I've been a fan of this ship ever since I joined the fandom, though I'm not really that big a fan of the most popular ship name for it, Kralsei. It just doesn't feel like a balanced mix of their names to me, so I prefer to call it Krisei. And that's what I'm gonna be calling it here too. Anyway, that's besides the point. What really gets to me is sheer amount of hate the ship gets for no real reason. Like, no joke, I feel like I've probably seen more Kralsei hate than any other ship in the fandom, including legitimately problematic ones like Spantis. So I guess I could debunk some of the popular talking points against the ship. Who knows? Maybe people will actually listen since this is a YouTube video and not a Toy House forum post or a YouTube comment. Number 1. One of the main points I hear is that ralsei and Asriel are supposedly the same character or are otherwise very connected to each other, and thus it'd be incest if he and Kris dated. In all honesty, I'm not smart enough to explain why this is wrong, so I'm gonna link a video by the YouTuber Kooki Autumn in the description as he debunks this way better than I could've. Though what I feel like is the biggest reason why they aren't the same person is that ralsei and Kris literally almost kiss each other when you pick all the hot options when building the Thrash machine in Chapter 1. I highly doubt that Toby Fox would think it'd be a good idea to include that part of the game if he intended for ralsei and Asriel to be the same person. Hell, from what I heard, Toby Fox literally made his homestick rock opera, A Baby Is You, as a critique of the fact that incest fanfiction was allowed on the Mispa forums. I highly doubt the dog supports incest. I won't deny that ralsei and Asriel probably do have some connection with each other in the story, though that doesn't necessarily mean they're the same character. Number 2. Some argue that since Kris is heavily implied to know they're being controlled by the player and don't like it, that apparently means that you're forcing things onto Kris if you ship them or pick all the cute interactions such as hugging ralsei during the battle tutorial, giving him the ribbon, etc. First of all, Kris is a fictional character. They are not a real person and they don't have feelings. They are a bunch of green and yellow and sometimes blue pixels created by some guy to tell a story. That's ID. But sure, let's entertain this honestly idiotic idea. If we're really forcing stuff onto Kris by shipping them with ralsei, how come nobody in the fandom says anything when people ship Kris with Susie, or Birdly, or hell, even Noelle? If shipping Kris with ralsei is forcing it, then that should apply to all kris ships, right? Gee. It's almost as if people are just making shit up so that they can have an excuse to harass people. Number 3. Just the T theory. This is honestly extremely simple to debunk if you think about it for more than 5 seconds. While yes, it's blatantly obvious that the different character T's heal the fun gang differently depending on what their opinions on that character are, the fact the ralsei T heals Kris so low means nothing considering the Noelle T heals ralsei even less. As far as I know, ralsei doesn't hate Noelle with a burning passion. The Noelle T just heals him a very low amount because at that point in the game, he literally just met her that day and doesn't know her that well. The same could be said for Kris with the ralsei T. By the time of me editing this video together, the only chapters out for the game are 1 and 2. And at this moment of the game's story, Kris only knew ralsei for 2 days. That said, the ralsei T only healing them 60% isn't that crazy. If anything, it could just mean they're not that close yet, which is entirely possible. Number 4. This is quite possibly the most stupid argument against ralsei I've heard. There are literally people in this fandom that say that people only like ralsei because they want to fuck ralsei and are just using Kris as a self-insert. Do I even need to explain why this is wrong? Do you guys seriously have that few meaningful things to say that you're just resorting to ad hominem attacks? Look, I understand not liking a ship because of a few bad eggs in the community. I personally don't like the Cherisk ship in Undertale because I saw a comic dub of them making out in my YouTube suggested tab when I was 10, yet you don't see me painting all Cherisk shippers as pedophilic perverts. In all honesty, I feel as though ralsei gets so much hate in the fandom is because ralsei is a feminine guy. That would explain why most of the people I've seen who hate this ship and harass ralsei shippers have those vibes of being obnoxious white boys who think being an edgelord makes you funny. So yeah, stay in your fucking lane. So I've been meaning to watch Jacksepticey's playthrough of the Silent Hill 2 remake, but I haven't had the time to do it yet. I've never played or watched a playthrough of any of the Silent Hill games, though I've heard a few things about it, and it honestly sounds really cool. Pretty much my only exposure to the games have been that one Drawfee video where they have to guess what the monsters look like based on their names, that one Wang video where he talks about the Walter Sullivan circumcision guy, and listening to Pyramid Head's Dead by Daylight chase theme, so it'll be fun seeing what the game is all about. That said, I don't really watch a lot of Let's Play content because it's pretty tough for me to get interested in a lot of things, including video games, if there's not something about the game that really hooks me, like an interesting art style or plot. I just won't check it out. Funnily enough, this is pretty much the opposite of how I was when I was younger. Back then, I would literally join a new fandom once a year. Like no joke, I joined the fandoms for Deltarune, A Hat in Time, Little Nightmares and Danganronpa pretty much back to back, and they were my obsessions pretty much for all of their perspective year before I moved on to the next. Hell, I actually got into the Little Nightmares fandom through Jacksepticey's playthroughs of Lane 1 and 2. Oh, maybe it'll be the same thing with Silent Hill? Speaking of gameplay videos, one of my favorite gaming YouTubers is Manly Bassishiro. He usually plays obscure indie games, and I like how he doesn't feel the need to scream everything he says, which, to clarify since I just mentioned him earlier, is not a jab at Jack and just how generally chill he is. I occasionally watch Markiplier too, though not really that often. Speaking of which, I once saw a tweet that stated that Jacksepticeye mocked the Johnny Depp Amber Heard case, but they didn't provide any proof, no screenshots, no video clips, nothing, and everyone in the replies were legitimately celebrating because they somehow were all neurodivergent and found Jack's voice overwhelming. Looking back on that now, that accusation was obviously fake and was just another instance of Twitter being a hellscape like it always is, but I still think about it sometimes. Man, I really don't miss using Twitter. I was banned a few years ago for spamming pictures of Wario under Elon Musk's tweets, and honestly, I'm glad I'm gone. Not only have my old cringy tweets been nuked off the face of the earth, but as mentioned earlier, That app is filled with useless drama and people being pieces of shit to each other, and it really wasn't good for my brain. The people I would follow who were also my peers for the most part, they had the most dogshit takes on topics they knew nothing about or were actively putting themselves in danger. Like seriously, I would see 15-year-olds openly post about the porn they look at and even sometimes post some of their Rule 30 for collections. I am hoping to God that none of those kids ended up getting groomed because of that. I also used to follow a lot of parody accounts, and angle the drama and toxicity in those spaces was fucking wild. Once you see Shaggy from Scooby-Doo ranting about how much he hates abortion and Alphys from Undertale being a trans medicalist, you've pretty much seen it all at that point. There was legit some drama going on a few years ago. It was essentially just a bunch of misogynists getting pissed off because some girl role-playing as the fucking glass pane from Minecraft liked posting selfies on her parody account and not her main. There was also that one girl who role-played as the Minecraft glass block who was extremely anti-abortion and was pretty much bragging about the fact that she got pregnant at 16. Twitter is fucking wild, man. I'm so glad I only use Tumblr now. It's much more chill on there. All the people I follow just post stuff like funny shitposts and cat pictures, and it is bliss. It also helped me deprogram a bit from the dumb things I was made to believe back on Twitter, since the people I follow actually know what they're talking about. In a sense, Tumblr made me less chronically online despite being a social media platform itself. I've thought about getting a Bluesky account, but from what I heard, it's a lot like Twitter, so my better judgment is telling me to stray away from it. Sure, there's probably a lot less toxicity, but still. Anyway, I feel we're far enough into the video that I can talk about this. My grandma died the other day. In all honesty, I'm not sad about it. Just kinda confused. T doesn't feel like something that actually happened, especially considering no one else in my family seem upset either. And TBH, I'm fine with that. That bitch has been abusing my family for 2 whole generations, so she doesn't deserve any fucking sympathy. Both she and my grandpa lived with us because my mom is a single parent, and honestly she just treated my older siblings like shit growing up, mostly because they're both autistic. Let's be real. I really don't want to get into what my mom and siblings went through since it isn't my story to tell, but just know that they got the worst of it. While I got the least of the abuse, that doesn't mean she was just super nice to me either. That cunt didn't fucking give a shit about me. She literally just saw me as competition for my mom's attention. She also knew damn well I had anxiety and just would not take it seriously, even going so far as to literally use one of my triggers against me because she thought it was funny. I know this probably sounds kinda goofy considering I'm talking about this over a time-lapse video of me drawing a fusion between my Danganronpa OC and Spamton from Deltarune, but I just need to talk about this because I'm tired of pretending to be okay with her bullshit. If you read my original story Mundane Believers on Wattpad, that whole argument Kulana has with her mom at the end was actually a metaphor for my relationship with my grandma and how I felt like I was expected to just put up with that shit because she's family. If or when she gets cremated, I swear to God I'm gonna be performing some sort of ritual to banish her ghost from this damn house, since tossing her urn into a volcano isn't an option. So yeah. See you in hell, Roberta. At least I get to have her room, I guess. Hoo boy. Only 20 more minutes of this video to go and I don't know what else to talk about. I know this'll probably give someone tonal whiplash or something considering how I was just talking about my grandma's passing, though considering everything I said about her, she doesn't deserve to have the rest of this video be as miserable as she was. Unlike what you might think, I'm actually not much of a yapper. I don't really talk much in general, TBH. Well, this video has had a bit of a bleak tone to it, so guess I could talk about random stuff I like. As some of you may know, I'm a big fan of retro and nostalgic things. Things like old computers, alt aesthetics such as scene and emo, and old girly flash games. I even have a few OCs based on these sorts of things. Like Cranch, who's based on old cringe Mary Sue OCs you'd make when you were a kid. Pixel, who's pretty much the embodiment of the Pacman arcade game. And Makeylin, who's based on girly flash games a la early Girls Ga games or Starsu. I can't really pin down an exact reason for why I like these types of things. It just scratches some sort of itch in my brain, I don't know. Another thing I think is cool is old black and white horror movies. I've never watched any myself, and from what I hear of them, I'd probably think they were boring if I did, but I really like the aesthetics. My favorite universal monster would definitely have to be Frankenstein's monster. Something about a guy who's made up of other guys is just super cool to me. It even inspired one of my OCs, a live clever name. I know, Yikno, if you think about it, all OCs are essentially just Frankenstein monsters. You're basically taking a bunch of things you like, such as pre-existing characters, aesthetics and tropes, and putting them all together to make a full character. If you really wanted to, you could extend this to mankind as a whole. We're all Frankenstein monsters made up of our parents' genes and our memories, life experiences and interests to make a full human. Geez. Didn't expect to get so philosophical there, lol. Anyway, another thing I enjoy is doll repaint videos. Some of my favorite YouTubers for that kind of thing are LIIITTTTLLLE, Catmillion Studios and April Rose. I've thought about customizing a few dolls myself and making them into my OCs, or whatever. The ones I have in mind are Yuriko, Makilin, Sierra, and maybe Sprite if I'm able to find a good child-sized doll. Oh, I'm too lazy and I don't really have much space in my house to display them at the moment. I find it so cool how people are able to do so much with something so simple as a Monster High doll. It's amazing. Like, you just start out with just a girl with like green skin or whatever, and by the end she's an extremely detailed demon queen with 6 arms and the lower half of a wombat. God, doll customizers really are something else. I am just now starting to realize that I could probably space out my different conversation topics a lot more, so that I don't have to keep constantly thinking of things to talk about on the spot. Hey, why don't we actually talk about what's on screen for once? So despite me talking about how quirky and different Yuriko is earlier, she actually has a lot of similarities with one of my other OCs, that being Purity. They're both tall, pale, blonde girls in their teens, albeit Yuri isn't exactly a teenager. She's 19 who grew up in privileged households and are massive overachievers due to trauma involving the fact that they're always compared to their parents. Not to mention they both wear shirts with bows on them with skirts. That said, I decided to draw them together because of how similar they are. In all honesty, I don't really think this is my best work. Yuri's pose is a little stiff and I feel as though it'd probably look a little better if they were closer together. I do like Yuri's pose though. It makes me think of the image they chose for Sugarcoat's page on the My Little Pony wiki. I don't know if you noticed, but Purity's pupils are a little more wobbly looking than Yuriko's. I like doing this when I draw more timid characters. It just adds a lot of personality. What can I say? Something I noticed lately is that I have this habit of drawing Yuri's skirt a little bigger and poofier than it's supposed to be, and I don't really know why. Same with small details such as her purse and her bow. Sometimes they're too big, sometimes they're too small. Sometimes the little pawn charm on her purse doesn't look like a chess piece at all. Sometimes it does. I feel like you can kinda tell I was getting kinda sick of drawing her in these last few drawings. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the gal, but I feel like I kinda underestimated the amount of time and effort it would take to draw every single idea I had written down when I put that on my to-do list. Not to mention that I like to have my ideas marinate in my head for a bit before I get them out, so maybe some of these just don't look too great because they're a bit undercooked. You guys wanna know what inspired my art style? When I was a kid, my art style was basically just a poor attempt at anime. I used the circle tool a lot, especially for the head, eyes and chest on female characters, and wasn't really inspired by anything. Nowadays my art is inspired by a lot of things. Mainly some artists I enjoy such as Lavender Town, SPEEDPAINT, Vivziepop, albeit I'm very hesitant to say I'm a fan of her considering all the controversy surrounding her and her shows and the stereotypical Tumblr art style from 2016. I was also inspired by shows such as Steven Universe and My Little Pony, specifically with how I draw wings. The more simplistic style I use for chibi art was also heavily inspired by the Paper Mario games. Were you able to tell that I was inspired by these things? This next piece is pretty interesting, so I noticed that Yuri's color palette is very red, so I wanted to see what she'd look like if she was green. I'm honestly super proud of how this looks. The pose, the way I drew her hair, the color palette, the composition, everything. As you saw in the beginning, I was originally gonna have her just standing there holding a bottle of poison, but I was getting sick of drawing characters just standing there, so I decided to go for a more dynamic pose, and I'm glad I did. This looks amazing. You know, something about me is that I love bright colors, so this was a real treat. Green isn't really my fave color, it's actually purple, but I sure do love me a good toxic poison theming, so that's what I went for. I don't know if it fits a character like Yuriko, but I think it looks cool, and that's what counts. I struggled quite a bit with the colors at first. At first I wanted to just turn her clothes green and change her eye color, but that didn't look very good, so I just decided to make all of her green. I will be changing her into a more greenish green later on. This next one I feel needs some context. So I'm a fan of the YouTuber SPEEDPAINT as mentioned in my last SPEEDPAINT, and he has a video where he and his friends look at out of context pages from the Sonic Archie comics, some of which were from that one arc where Knuckles turned green. This drawing is based on a joke they made when they got to that part. I struggled a lot with the perspective on Yuri's hand here. I don't really play around with perspective much in my art in general, though I'm sure you already knew that. Fun fact, Celeste's aged-up design in the Yurikoverse is very loosely inspired by fanart I saw in an AM once. Basically, it was art of her aged up, I'm assuming, and at that point in time I only saw that AM once and I misremembered how the artist drew her hair. I thought they just gave her one hair drill instead of the two she canonically has, but when I watched the AM again I realized she just had a braid. Before I realized my mistake though, I really liked the idea and I decided to incorporate it into my design. I wish I could give the artist a shout out, but you know how AM creators are with art credit. None of the art of Celeste in this video is the first time I drew this design though. The first time would actually be this one shitpost comic I made a while back. I was originally gonna talk about how getting angry over nothing is stupid and how people should be more chill over the internet, but then I remembered I already went on a bit of a tangent on that in my last SPEEDPAINT as well as in this video kinda, so I'll just talk about something else. So my shrumped in Good Luck Babe animatic did really well, thanks guys. I remember I was really scrambling to get it done before the election because I wasn't sure when it was gonna be. Ironically though, the animatic still ended up being outdated by the time it released because Biden dropped out around the time I was making it lol. I'm still proud of that animatic though. It's weird how sentimental I am for that stupid fanfiction I only really had the idea of making when I was 12 that I went out of my way to make an angsty video about it. If you haven't watched it yet, please do. I put a lot of effort into it. Though I do admit that the animatic story does sort of clash a little with the meaning of the song. The song Good Luck Babe is about a closeted lesbian getting with multiple men to try and run from the fact that she's gay, while a woman she previously hooked up with tries to get her to come to her senses. At least, that's what I gathered from it. I could be slightly wrong. Meanwhile, my animatic is about a gay couple, a straight passing one at that, since Shrek is a pre-transition trans guy for most of it, breaking up due to societal pressure, and one of them watches on as the other one dates other guys to try and run away from the fact he still loves his ex. By the by, I feel this goes without saying, but I don't condone shipping real people. Obviously, Shrek isn't a real person. But Donald Trump and Joe Biden are opening parenthesis ... as much as I wish they weren't. I believe that shipping real people together is extremely creepy and can actually harm the relationship between the people involved. Not that I care about a piece of shit politician's feelings, but you get the point. That animatic was one big shitpost, and I don't actually ship anyone in the video. I'd like to make more animatics once I get the time, though I still have the stuff on my to-do list. Well ... to do. Speaking of my to-do list, I'm getting closer and closer to the end. I thankfully left the super easy stuff for last, so this'll be a breeze. For one, I found these really cool page deco badge thingies on Toy House, so I'm gonna be putting them on my OC's profiles. Might take a while since you gotta use HTML to put the badges on your OC profiles. Next, I'm finally gonna be getting around to binging My Little Pony on my completely legal and paid streaming service. Then I'm gonna go through some of my Wattpad library. I'll get around to playing through chapter 2 of Danganronpa 2, and then I'll be free. And then I probably do something that ends up taking a lot of time, like writing a fanfiction or something, which will cause me to not have the time to do the stuff I want to do. Oh, I'd have to make another to-do list, and the cycle continues. Because you know, that's usually what happens. Considering the fact that I've been scrambling for topics a lot at certain points in this video, I'd honestly make a terrible podcaster, lol. In all honesty, aside from my visit to Ohio last month and my grandma's passing, nothing really all that interesting has happened lately. I mean, I voted for the very first time the other day, but I don't know if you'd want to hear me talk about that. I've been trying to refrain from talking much about my personal life ever since I left Amino, since random strangers on the internet don't need to know about that. But even then, not much happened. I'm thinking I shoulda separated this video into 2 parts or some, cause I'm really struggling with this. Like, this shit has enough megabytes for like 4 videos and makes CapCut crash or exit out of editing if I even do so much as look at it funny. But I mean, I'm this far into it, so no turning back now. I remember back when I used Deltarune Amino, I saw a post on the featured page from the admins about how they were updating the rules or whatever, and during the part about harassment and name-calling they felt the need to explain what a whore was. I have no idea why they did that, considering I don't think they did that with other insults. Not to mention, I feel like if you're above the age of like 10, you already know what that is. And you gotta be at least 13 to make an account on most social media platforms, but go off, I guess. Since this is a video about Yuriko, how about we talk about her again? I swear she's the most fleshed out of all my OCs, lol. That's how you know she's my favorite. It's mostly just random details that don't really matter, if I'm being real. Like, for one, she listens to boomer dad music such as Oingo Boingo and the Talking Heads. But if anyone were to ask her what kind of music she liked, she'd just put on the most shitposty memey shit you could imagine. She's also insanely cracked at dancing because of all the Just Dance she played on her Wii back in middle school. And also, she was raised to hate perverts with a burning passion. If you played Danganronpa, you'd know why. Oh, and did I mention she has a whole nother form where she's in middle school? You're looking at it right now. In this form, She's a nerdy wannabe scene kid who's obsessed with werewolves and has a crush on Shadow the Hedgehog. If I recall correctly, her design is inspired by Gyaru fashion, specifically the Kogel style. Oh yeah, and she had her own self-insert Sonic OC named Yuri the Wolf, who she shipped with Shadow. In all fairness, her middle school form does exist for a reason. It's supposed to show what she was like before she became traumatized and like what she lost and whatnot, but it's still ridiculous that I felt the need to flesh out this girl this much, especially considering I've never done this with any of my other OCs. If I wrote a story on Wattpad about her backstory or whatever, this would probably be super impactful, but I dunno. Then again, I'd say I have been getting better at writing angst and emotional scenes. And by that I mean I've fully harnessed the power of projecting my mental illness onto fictional characters. Anyway, I feel like if Yuri the human wasn't mentally ill, she'd enter Gambit into a bunch of dog shows and she'd be the ultimate dog trainer or something. Well, we're at the final time lapse for this video, which means I don't have to think about stuff to talk about anymore. I'm hoping to God that making the thumbnail and writing the description won't take as long as it did to edit this together. So yeah, like, comment and subscribe and whatnot. I'll leave you to watch the rest of the video in silence now. Bye.